It's there! Holy moly, this one's going to go big.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. Recently, Old School Nudgers posted this to their Facebook page. I'm a subscriber to Old School Nudgers on Facebook, and basically on their newsfeed, mostly every day, they will post something like this. It'll be an old flyer, an old postcard, clips of a machine being played, a picture of a machine. You get the idea. There was a recent one of, let me just see if I can find it. There we are. So stuff like that. Interesting little curiosities for, your fruit machine geeks, of which I am most certainly one. So that's the original advertisement there for Viva Espana being launched on the £6 jackpot, for example. So I keep an eye on that newsfeed. I'm subscribed to it, so whatever they post to their Facebook page turns up in my newsfeed. And I will always cast an eye over whatever it is posted. Now, this one was posted, about a week ago now. Fairly standard stuff in many ways, but what caught my eye was this bit down at the bottom here. That, by the way, there, Adeline, that was obviously a new JPM low-tech at the time. I'll give you the date here, by the way, which is the 27th of July, 1990. This is from the amusement sort of industry magazine called Amusement Business. It was a coin slot style magazine periodical that ran in the 1990s. I'm not sure it made it into the 2000s, but back in the heyday of the fruit machines and the arcades, there were more than just coin slot. I think coin slot is the only one left standing. Now, interestingly, this is not emulated, not as far as I'm aware. I've had a look through my fruit machine emulation collection. I cannot find a layout for it, and I do not remember ever playing that in the emulator. Whether or not we just haven't got the ROMs, I don't know. If they're out there, it would be an interesting one to see, and we do at least have an image, albeit not a very good one. The closest I can find is, where the bloody hell is it? There we are, is High-Low Silver. High-Low Silver is emulated, and it's very similar to Adeline, but it's not the same. Can you see here, Hi-Ho Silver has got the cash pot mechanic going on there, which Adeline does not have. There's no cash pot on that. That's a slight aside. What caught my eye, though, more, was this bit down at the bottom, which is age limit for AWP's bill reappears. And let's have a little look. The hue and cry over an age limit for the use of amusement machines made a brief reappearance in Parliament again last week, with the presentation of another new bill seeking to impose restrictions. The Gaming Machines Prohibition on Use by Persons Under 18 bill was presented by Jimmy Dunnachie, Labour MP for Glasgow Pollock. The aims of the bill were to prohibit the use of gaming machines by people under the age of 18. The move follows on from Dunnachie's earlier challenge to the Prime Minister that penalties be imposed on those who expose under 18-year-olds to gaming machines. Dunnachie cited the case of a 15-year-old in Kilmarnock who was convicted for murder due, allegedly, to a machine addiction. Dunnachie's bill, like others before it, is doomed to almost certain failure as a second reading must achieve unanimous support. Now, on a more general note, I've made multiple references to this kind of thing in several videos. These are just the ones that come to mind off the top of my head about this ongoing battle that there has been from certain people in the Houses of Parliament or in other walks of life who have pushed back against the normalisation of gambling for children. If you can think of the traditional seaside amusement arcade as, more accurately, a child casino, there's always been this body of people who've pushed back against that, saying, no, that this isn't right. And I'm talking all the way back to the 1970s forward. Obviously, at one point, we did finally get the legislation that split the machines off into the adult gambling, but the junior gambling still remained, with the £5 jackpot machines And now we have the final evolution of that, of course, with the ticket machines, which I covered in that video there where Slotsmith Magic had a quick walk around his local arcade before the owner accosted him. He was filming their Bar X machines, which are paying out tickets, which can have RTPs of like 35%, which are, of course, available to children in seaside arcades. And honestly, that would have been the end of it for this one. However, it was very late in the day. I was kind of just winding down, getting ready to go to bed. I read that on the Old School Nudgers Facebook page, and I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to have a little Google around to see if I can find out any more about that. So all I did was typed the guy's name, Jimmy Dunnachie, with gaming machines bill into Google, and there are some results out there. Even though this is all the way back in 1990, a lot of historical Parliament records have been digitised now. All the old Hansard, all the old bills, legislation, all that kind of thing, an awful lot of it is now digitised, online and searchable, because of course back in 1990 there was no internet for any of this stuff to go on, but an ongoing government project over many, many years in the UK has put an awful lot of this information online where you can search it and read it. And I found myself going down a little bit of a rabbit hole to find out what happened to this bill back in 1990, and that's what we're going to have a look at here. Now, at this point, I am going to invoke some AI. I'm not anti-AI, I am an AI skeptic, I would say, but I do readily acknowledge there is some stuff that it's good at and there is some stuff that it's useful for. If you think of it as a tool and you are aware of its limitations and the things that it can get wrong and the fuck-ups that it can make, there are some tasks that it can perform quite effectively. Searching is one of them, which I know you say, well, Google is search. If you want to go back far enough, Yahoo was search. But this is kind of like search on steroids. It's very, very good at consuming a huge amount of information and spitting out summaries with references. The good thing here that you can see is that it has come back with actual references. So what I've done for these, I've had AI search it for me, and then I've gone back through the historical records myself to check that all the information is correct and to pick out the pertinent points that we'll want to cover in this video. And as you can see, this guy here had a 2-year tussle from March 1988 to July 1990, where he was presenting a private member's bill to try and get restrictions placed on gaming machines. Now, we know how this story finished because, of course, this never happened. Now, if you follow it through, you can see here that what happened is it dropped into the usual kind of black hole that private members' bills can drop into in Parliament, which feeds back to how it was reported in the Amusement Business magazine. So private members' bills, they don't have a great success rate because they're not being backed by the government of the time, as it were. So it's difficult to get one of these into law, but it did get debated in Parliament, and your fella here, Jimmy Dunnachie, made his speech in Parliament, which we'll have a look at. But essentially, it was lost in the noise and red tape of Parliament. It's very easy to bring these things down, as you can see here. They can be talked out or blocked by a single objection from an MP. You see here as well, the amusement trade lobby turned up as well to say that stopping children from gambling would be using a hammer to crack a nut. Also that small shops and cafes relied on the revenue, and that a strict ban would be economically damaging and difficult to police. Now, this guy came back more than once. He had more than one crack at this to represent it to Parliament, but in the end, you can see here that it got tied up in procedural objections. Amazingly, it only takes one MP to object to one of these things, and it can essentially be stopped. There's something here that it refers to as the zombie phase and then the cycle, whereby it just kept being deferred. It was objected to and deferred, and it went round in a circle, and that eventually Parliament ran out. The time for Parliament ran out, and it never got as far as a second reading. Jimmy Dunnachie went on, I'm afraid to say, he died in 1997. This bill never came to pass. This was one of the big things that he presented to Parliament to try and get through, and it basically went nowhere. Now, one of the things that I've covered in these videos here is how the gambling industry has been very, very good over the decades of making sure that it's well represented, that it has friendly people in Parliament. In one of these videos here, I did talk about how the gambling industry started schmoozing around Labour. Once it became clear that Labour were going to win the last general election, the one in 2024, that they started making sure they were getting into bed with the right people. I've said before, Private Eye have been really good at covering this, that freebies for Labour MPs, supporting events, inviting them to talks and industry presentations, all that sort of thing, making sure that they have the ears of people in government. And that's not a new thing. That's been going on for decades. And that is exactly what happened here. It basically got talked out of Parliament, didn't get as far as a second reading. The bill died effectively at the end of that Parliament in 1990, and then 7 years later, Jimmy Dunnachie himself died as well. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can see it on the screen here. I'll start a thread over at Desert Island Fruits as usual as well, and I'll stick some links in the video description, but I will just read out a couple of sections here. Remember, just so we're clear here, what this guy's trying to do, what he's saying here is, I don't think children should be allowed to gamble. I don't think children should have access to machines that are highly addictive and dangerous. You would think that that wasn't particularly controversial. Let's have a look at what he said in Parliament. School children are lured to gaming machines by their flashing lights and beckoning noises. But what begins as a game can all too often develop into a tragic addiction which ruins the lives of the young and innocent and puts unbearable strains on their families. Every study which has examined the problem among school children has shown that young people can get hooked on gaming machines as quickly as they can on drink or drugs, and the effects are no less devastating. The addiction created by machine gambling has been compared to the compulsion experienced by animals used in reinforced learning experiments in psychology. Young machine gamblers, like the animals, will play with mindless repetition and furious speed in their determination to get it right. Modern technology encourages that, because the nudge and hold features delude the young person into believing that he or she can beat the system. The evidence of these and other studies is frightening and demands that we take immediate action to end this growing social menace. Machine gambling is shown to be the major gambling problem in every age group from 11 to 16. Evidence also shows that these young school children gamble not only in amusement arcades and fun fairs, but congregate every day in small shops, snack bars, fish and chip shops and cafes to spend their lunch money feeding not themselves, but the insatiable appetite of the machines. School children who gamble share common problems: poor work, aggressive behaviour, truancy, emotional disturbance and stealing. It is sad to note that all the evidence confirms that those who become addicted to machine gambling were introduced to the machines before they were 13 years old, and in some cases when they were even younger. The addiction leads to lying, The addiction also leads to lying, deceit, shame and mistrust, which are commonly found in the homes of young gamblers. Those problems have become so acute that a support group, Parents of Young Gamblers, has had to be formed. Addicted children do not suddenly kick the habit when they leave school. Many progress to the betting shops and gambling casinos, while desperation for the money that their addiction consumes drives others to commit serious crimes of violence. The law is lax on this matter, not through any deliberate attempt to exploit, but merely because no one foresaw the scale of the potential danger when the machines were first introduced. The problem of school-age gambling is the proverbial one of Topsy. It just grew. If it is not halted quickly, it will produce a gambling epidemic in the not-too-distant future. Let us not forget the huge profits that can be made from gaming machines. One example of profitability was noted in the recent statement by the chief executive of the Rank organisation. Referring to bingo profits, he admitted only 30% of our profits actually come from bingo. We make most money from the AWP or fruit machines, followed by food and drink. We can be sure that gaming machines found in fairgrounds, arcades and small shops are no less profitable for their owners. I ask the House to act to prevent young persons under 16 years gaining access to gaming machines in fairgrounds and amusement arcades, and to remove such offending machines from snack bars, small shops, cafes and fish and chip shops, which are the regular haunts of school children. Again, I stress the urgency with which I ask the House to act. If even one more life is lured into the horrendous net of hard gambling as a result of our failure to give protection, it will be a tragedy, not only for the individual and his family, but, now that we have been alerted to the scale and dangers of the problem, for the conscience of the House. I ask the House to support this bill. Now, we know that the House did not support the bill. Can you see the date we're going back to here? March 17th, 1988. We've got some details of the process there. We also have the main debate. What you can see, though, there is that by the end of it, you've basically got the, well, if we're being polite, we'd call them ignorant. If we're being more honest, I'd suggest we'd call them the industry stoolies in Parliament, saying, well, yeah, it's a bit of a problem, but we've got a voluntary code of conduct. It's economic activity, good for business. We'll have a think about it. We'll have a chat about it. We don't really think there's a need for any new legislation at this point. So we'll leave it at that for now, if that's all right. We also have there, this one is just one of the occasions on which this bill came back, because if you remember from the summary there, this guy was having a crack at this for over 2 years. You've got to remember here, I'm going through this in sort of 20 minutes or so here. Your man here, Jimmy Dunnachie, he was plugging away at this for over 2 years, and he actually brought it back in a different form at one point as well to try and get this thing through. But it just didn't happen. And we've also got this one here from February 89. It is referring to the Gaming Machines Act there, as you can see. I don't know if we're just missing some information here, but that's one of the last references I can find to it in Hansard. The date given here that refers to July 1990, if you actually follow the links off that one, it brings you back to this one here. I've tried to search these pages myself. It's a little bit hit and miss, and frankly, Gemini did a better job of it than I could. It found stuff that I couldn't find. But as we know all too well, this did not pass into law. It didn't happen. The guy did his best, bless him, but he was stymied by a system here that clearly did not want it to happen. The other point here as well is that this is all based around in 1988 to 1990 when this was happening. They were still operating out of the Gaming Act 1968. Now, if you think about the technological landscape of 1968 versus 1988, that's a very different thing. Back in the 1960s, as much as anything else, that was before the age of microprocessors. Everything back then was electromechanical. The whole computer revolution had happened. Throughout the late 1970s, that was when your first sort of solid-state microprocessor-controlled machines first started being made. In the late 1970s, by 1988, they were well established. And as we know, the controls and compensators that you could put into machines, even by the late 1980s, were reasonably sophisticated. Not what the Gaming Act of 1968 had been designed to legislate and control and set down the rules and regulations for at all. Now, as I said earlier, I went down a little bit of a late night rabbit hole with this. What just started from this simple image being posted on the Old School Nudgers Facebook page, reading that there, Googling the guy's name in the bill, and I ended up reading through all of this stuff here and poking around on the Hansard website and the House of Commons archives. It also managed to find, by the way, from this General Practice Journal, there's an article here about addictive gambling, which you can just see down the right hand side there, which is making reference to the same bill. And we've got this comment here, which is, according to the Royal College of Psychiatrists, children are spending large amounts of money, often borrowed or stolen from family and friends, on fruit machine gambling. Addicted to playing such machines, children often skip school. And the college's General Purposes Committees agreed that the RCGP should support the Royal College of Psychiatrists. So you can see there, that's the Royal College of General Practitioners, that's the RCGP, in September 1988, basically coming out in support of what the Royal College of Psychiatrists has said about addictive gambling in children, specifically referencing fruit machines. And once I had gone through all of that and looked up the man himself there on his Wikipedia page, I then went back to this because it recontextualizes it. Because if you think about it, on the face of it, this should be like a serious threat to the industry. You've got an MP standing up in the House of Commons saying in very, very clear terms how damaging and addictive fruit machines are to school children, talking about crime, addiction, violence. If you have a look down this one here, by the way, there's talk of suicide, self-harm, all kinds of terrible things that are directly being linked to fruit machine addiction in school children. And yet, Amusement Business magazine here in July 1990 kind of doesn't give a shit, because this date here, July 1990, can you see, that was when it finally died, where we get the bill never reached the committee stage, where it would have been examined line by line because it could never get past the initial hurdle of a second reading debate. That is correct, but the thing that stuck out to me here was they knew exactly what was going to happen. The industry wasn't even remotely worried because they've seen this play out before. You know, age limit for AWP's bill reappears. Dunnachie's bill, like others before it, remember how I said before in the other videos, this has been going on for decades and none of it ever got anywhere. It just went to die in Parliament. Says here, the bill, like others before it, is doomed to almost certain failure, as a second reading must achieve unanimous support. That comes back to what I said before. It only takes one cockwomble to put the hand up and say, object, and that's it. The whole thing's fucked. They only need one person in the Commons, to say I object to that, and the whole thing just fucking dies. So that tells you how much they care about it, because all it got, this thing which if you think about it in your head, you'd expect this would be seen as a real threat. This is a real danger to our business here, because we've got an MP standing up in the House of Commons really putting the boot in to these addictive products that we're filling kiddie casinos up and down the UK with. What it actually got was a little box at the bottom of page 34 to say, yeah, whatever, fuck all's going to happen. We've seen it before. We'll see it again. We know we're going to win. We don't care. We're just going to carry on. To the extent that that is the entire reporting of this getting to the House of Commons, being brought up by this MP, because they know that this here is going to happen and they will get away with it again. And then the final piece of this is that date there, Friday the 27th of July 1990. Because I have the ability to rewind time to July 1990, because I still have the diary that I kept in that year. Now, the 26th and the 27th, so the 27th being the exact date here, didn't really have anything that would tie into this as being relevant, but let me show you here. This is just a snip of the top of my entry from July the 24th, 1990. So let me just show you those dates there. 3 days apart from 36 years ago. Now, it's not great. It's not particularly sensational because this is the diary of a 16-year-old teenager. But what I am in here is the period between my GCSEs and my A-levels. So this is the summer holidays 1990, and I will be starting my A-levels in September 1990. But on the morning of Tuesday the 24th of July 1990, we have this. Went into Bury, spent about £2.40, most on Chase HQ, which I finally finished, though it took 2 credits. Now, where I played Chase HQ is that arcade there on the rock in Bury. That's part of the video, PCP's Crisscross Jackpot, the winning trick I worked out myself. And that was in, we have a little section there where I'm finding that arcade on Google Street View for that video. Changing, it was a few different things over the years. It was a Nobles at one point. If you go back far enough, it was the Rock. And then I think we also have it down as an Admiral at one point as well. It's been an arcade forever and ever, and it was an arcade in 1990. But can you see the thing that is missing from that entry? No fruit machines, and that is because July 1990 was before I started playing fruit machines. Within just a few weeks of that date, that would happen there. The Degsy Degworth interview with Cheerful Pessimist, where I talked with him about the very first time I played a fruit machine at my brother's golf club, which was in 1990. Well, that was just a few weeks after that entry there, and that marked the start of my fruit machine addiction. By the end of 1990, I was on the way. I was into fruit machines, but not hugely so. It was going through 1991 when we could get served in the pubs, where it went full bore. Within a few weeks of that entry, I had played my first fruit machine. By the end of 1990, I was well on the way to being an addict. 1 year after that, by July 1991, I was a full bore addict. But in July 1990, I could go into an arcade, spend £2.40, play the video games. They had a pinball in there. They had a Dr. Dude pinball in there, which, as memory serves, I do mention in that video there. You can, yeah, there's a picture of Chase HQ. So they had They're the two things that I can really remember. The Dr. Dude pinball and the stand-up Chase HQ that looked exactly like that. They had a shoot 'em up in there and a couple of other things. That stuff was against the back wall. It was almost entirely fruit machines, but they did have a little kind of amusement arcade area at the back with pinball and some video games. And at that point in July 1990, I could walk into an arcade. I just walked past all the fruit machines, right? If you can conceptualize that based on the fact that all of those gambling Loebs videos are a thing for me. 10 years of addiction for me would start within weeks of me writing this entry. When I could walk into an arcade, the fruit machines, like I say, they were essentially not there. They were not part of my field of view. I could walk through the amusement arcade, ignoring all the bloopy bleepy boxes of lights, and go and spend... I mean, for £2.40 there, I suspect I probably had maybe 45 minutes of entertainment. Certainly to clear Chase HQ takes about 10 minutes just up by itself. Which, incidentally, there is a whole video about on the channel where I managed to single credit clear Chase HQ, playing it in MAME, on proper difficulty level, on the same difficulty level that the Chase HQ that they had in that arcade in 1990 was set to. Like, a lot of my abilities at Chase HQ, because I am, in fairness, like, pretty good at the game. I mean, it's not a trivial job to single credit clear Chase HQ. And a lot of my abilities at that game do hark back to when I played it so much in that arcade in Bury. There is the entry. There is a pre-gambling me that walks into an arcade, spends £2.40 and maybe 45 minutes and walks out again. At that very time, this guy here was standing up in the House of Commons to try and get the bill that he'd been fighting for over 2 years to at least get to the second reading stage. Those two things were basically happening at the same time. As this guy's bill finally died, for the last time, he'd been trying, and this was it. This was when it got a bullet in the head, and it would never happen. Oblivious pre-addiction me, not knowing what was coming down the tracks, not knowing that I was weeks away from a decade of oblivion. This guy was fighting in the House of Commons because he knew how dangerous these things were. And I was the next victim. In July 1990, I didn't know it. By the end of 1990, I would certainly know it. And 1 year after that date, I was fucked. So I guess the point here is it's not like no one knew. It's not like nobody ever tried to do anything about this. The problem was known. The research was there. The voices were there. The people who were standing up to try and put a stop to this because they could see the damage it was doing. They were there and they were present and they were doing their best. But unfortunately, they were up against a machine which they could not beat. They were up against an industry that made sure its interests were represented. They made sure that they, slightly careful of what I say, they made sure that they had the ears of the correct people. They made sure that they had people in the correct places to, inverted commas, represent their interests. There were people in the Houses of Commons who would say, object, and kill the bill that was designed to stop children from becoming addicted to machines, an addiction that would then very often carry on into their adult lives, that would blight their lives and the lives of all those around them. I lived that life for 10 years. It's not very nice. It's not to say that you do not have a life outside of that, because you're still a human being, but as anyone who's been there will know for themselves, an addiction is a terrible, terrible thing to live with, not just for yourself, but for the people around you as well. And there was something about that article there. I don't know quite why. It's the type of stuff that old school nudgers post all the time, but I think it was because it was just late at night and my brain was in the space where, rather than just reading it and going, okay, that's a bit interesting, I suppose, I was minded to go and Google, see if I could find some details about it, set Gemini on it, and Gemini, in fairness, did a good job of finding those pages on the Parliament website, the original Hansard record. So I know it's not an AI hallucination because it has provided the sources there, which you can then... I read through myself, and you, of course, can read through that for yourselves as well. And it's with that date as well, because I thought, I can find out what I was doing in July 1990. Pulled my diary and was like, okay, there we are. When this bill was finally being put down for the last time, never to come back again. The thing that the guy had been trying for 2 years to do. At that time, there I was, literally within days of that article being published in that amusement business periodical. Like 2 days earlier, I'd just been in an arcade playing Chase HQ and pinball and other video games and walking out again. Little did I know that within weeks, my decade of addiction would be starting. So there you go, folks. That's it for this one. It just makes me sad, really. But do also know that there were people out there who were trying, and who were trying very hard to have some positive changes made in this space, who were saying, you know what, we really should be doing a better job of protecting our young people from this kind of terrible addiction. Unfortunately, they were up against a machine that would not let them win. In the same way that me and an awful lot of people like me were also up against machines that would not let them win. Thank you very much for watching. Do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch up with you next time. But for now it is goodbye.